Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Basic Steps to Starting a Business. My name is Christopher Garcia, and I'm the Business Development Specialist at the SBDC at UNM Valencia Campus Workforce Training Center. And I created this webinar off of a great document on our website called The Basic Steps to Starting a Business. And my contact information is on the slide, and a PDF of the slides will be emailed to you. And I usually do that in a follow-up email. But most of my attendees are very eager beavers. So until I send out the email, you could access the follow-up email from the link that I'm going to chat out now. So let me chat that out to everyone. And it's all the links that I'm going to talk about in the presentation. Keep that handy. Before we begin, let's go over some webinar ground rules. Everyone on the call right now is muted, so don't worry about background noise. Only I have to worry about background noise. And there's a feature to raise your hand, and I'll use it throughout the webinar to make sure it's flowing. And if at any time during the webinar something like serious is happening, like I'm using the wrong slide, you can't hear me or see me, please raise your hand, and then I'll know something's going on. You could also chat with me if something like that's happening. But if you want to ask a question about any of the content of this webinar, please put it in the Q&A. And in fact, everybody could hear me and see my slides. Will you raise your hand for me? Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Cami. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Ginger. Thank you, Erica. I appreciate it. I saw a few more people pop on this call right now. So let me chat over that follow-up email link. Make sure everybody has it. Perfect. Thank you, Michael. And then just to make sure everybody knows how to use the Q&A and the Q&A is working, would you chat over a hi, hello, how are you into the Q&A for me? Hello, Sandy. Hey there, Erica. Hello, Seth. Perfect. The reason I want you to put your questions about the slideshow into the Q&A is because we could print a report of the questions and it indexes them on the a recording. So there'll be a recording of this. And if you have a question, they'll tell you at what time in the recording that question was answered. Hello, Michael, and hello, Cami. Thank you for joining us today. So here's a graphic of our center locations throughout New Mexico. And the mission of the SBDC is to build skilled entrepreneurs and strong businesses by offering no-cost confidential business consulting and low or no-cost training events like this one. And I'm going to tell you about the SBDC in the next few slides, but you might notice the powered by the SBA disclaimer at the bottom of the slide. Our major stakeholders are the state of New Mexico and the Small Business Administration. So these webinars and this counseling is your tax dollars at work. So take advantage of it for sure. This slide includes some topics for upcoming webinars. We just had our QuickBooks online training. It's going to be on demand on the workshops page until the 22nd. So if you want to see the recording, sign up for that one. Some webinars that are coming up that I want to highlight are in March. We're going to have, we have 3 major partners with the SBDC, the International Business Accelerator, the Technology Commercialization Accelerator, and the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. We're going to have a webinar on each of those as an introduction to what they do and how you could work with them. So if you're interested in any of those, they're online on our website page. So our workshop page on the website. So register for those coming up. And tomorrow is going to be sales and marketing methods with the director from our SBDC in Roswell, Scott Booker. So if you're interested in that one, I think there's about 10 seats left. Here's the agenda for today's training. I'm going to tell you more about the SBDC, talk to you about our pre and post surveys for this training, get into the basic steps. There's going to be 13 of them. and review and demonstrate our excellent research tools. And then I'll take some questions. I'll also have you raise your hand throughout the presentation. And in fact, I like to see from where people are joining the webinar. So if you're joining the webinar from Central New Mexico, so Albuquerque metro area, Albuquerque, Los Lunas, Rio Rancho, would you raise your hand for me? Okay, very good. Most of my attendees usually come from that area. So thank you for joining us. If you're from, let's see, northeast New Mexico, so maybe the Clayton area, Tucumcari, would you raise your hand for me? Doesn't look like we have any Northeasterners here. How about Northwest? Are you from Farmington, that area? Do I have anybody from the north? Oh, good. Thank you for joining me all the way from the north. Oh, good. We have almost as many people from Northwest as we do from Central New Mexico. Very good. Thank you, guys. How about Southeast? So Hobbs, Lovington. Oh, thank you for joining us all the way from the Southeast. Perfect. And how about Southwest? So maybe Southwest, what's in the Southwest? The Boot Heel, Antelope Springs, Deming, Silver City. Oh, thank you for joining us all the way from the Southwest. So it looks like we have almost all segments of New Mexico represented here except the Northeast. So I'm glad to have such a diverse group with me today. Now let's talk about the services of the SBDC. We offer two major services: confidential business consulting and low or no cost business trainings. There are no limits to how much no cost counseling or trainings you could take or receive. And we have centers throughout New Mexico, so there'll be one close to you. And if you look at the graphic in the upper right-hand corner, it shows what we do: renew, grow, launch, and start up small businesses. Before I go to the next slide, let me chat over the link for the follow-up email, because I see a few more people have joined us. And I will send that out to everybody who attends today, but you could access it until I send it out using that link I chatted to everybody. This slide shows what we expect from our clients. My fellow business advisors and center directors want you to succeed. So we'll assign you homework or further research, and please do the work necessary to succeed. We can't make decisions for you or offer tax or legal advice. We could only connect you to the information you need to make educated decisions. And part of making educated decisions is working with licensed professionals like attorneys and accountants. Next, I want to remind you about important surveys we sent out as part of attending these trainings. Everyone who registered for this webinar received an email from, I believe it's Annalena, saying, in anticipation of the upcoming basic steps to starting a business in New Mexico webinar you have registered for, we would like to collect some preliminary information. With this information in hand, we can tailor the course material to better fit your needs. And I want to see, just by a show of hands, how many of you have received the pre-webinar survey link? Better see everybody's hand up. Okay. Very good. Most of you have. If you have not, please look in your spam or your junk email box. And then after this presentation, we'll send you another survey. Please do that survey. They're part of our obligations to the Small Business Administration, and we do value your feedback. We really do. Very good. Now let's talk about starting a business in New Mexico. Before going into business, there are some important things you must consider. Will I make enough money to live? Will this replace my current income? Do I need the benefits offered by my current employer, like retirement plans, medical insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, or other important benefits? Can you replace those benefits by starting your business? You must also think about your educational background and skills. Do you have the correct educational background and skills to understand and operate the many facets of a business, including bookkeeping, accounting, human resources, supply chain management, which is my least favorite, sales, and that's just to name a few. If not, you may need to hire somebody to perform these tasks or obtain further training. And remember, we offer that no cost or low cost training, so take advantage of those. On the slide, I have a link to a document on our website called Test Your Potential as an Entrepreneur. My links tend not to work. It's probably because of the universe settings. So let me bring up that follow-up email link that I sent you. And then one of the first links should be Test Your Potential as an Entrepreneur. Let me make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. Let me do a stop share and a new share. And put that guide back on. So yes, I think you are seeing the Test Your Potential as an Entrepreneur document. So the first part of it, it's a rating of your skills and abilities. This will help you see where there might be gaps in your skills, and you could get training in those. Bring them up to your SBDC counselor, center director, and we could help you fill in those gaps. Next is the myths and misconceptions about being an entrepreneur. Then we have identifying startup ideas. There's some great insight for you. Feasibility analysis, which I really enjoy doing research for feasibility analysis. Estimating the cost of a startup. And we also, in addition to this, we have a special software we use. It's called the South Dakota spreadsheet. And it helps us create financial projections for a business based on some critical assumptions we make. If you want to use that software, you have to make an appointment with your SBDC advisor, but I highly recommend it opposed to doing it like this. But this is a good document to get some of those figures you'll need for that software. Personal living costs, and if you apply for a small business loan, they'll ask you, they have a special document usually in the loan application for you to give your personal living costs and any income coming in the home. Then you have a recap of costs. And then the document on which this webinar is based, the basic steps to starting a business, 1 through 13. And then on the back of that sheet is section 2 with contact information for local government agencies. Perfect. Let's go back to our slideshow. Now let's go through the steps one by one. These slides will be emailed to you again, so don't worry about writing down web addresses. Step 1 is defining the business. This is the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And these questions are answered in a business plan. And if you need a business loan, you must provide a business plan and at least 1 to 2 years of financial projections to the lender. Many centers use a fill in the blank template, and I've included that in the links. Let me bring that up on your side. Let's go here, and I included the link to the SBDC at UNM business plan template, and it's a Word document. Fill in the blank. They also use this template, I believe, in Alamogordo. I know they use it in Alamogordo, and I believe Las Cruces. It's my favorite template that I've used so far, and I use it as a great way to schedule our meetings based on what we need to do. So that's my preference. But there's a bunch of resources for creating a business plan. There's software like Live Plan from Palo Alto Software. The Small Business Administration has a great training with worksheets of sample financial statements on their website. I highly recommend you visit the SBA's website and go to their learning center. And there's more tools available at nmsbdc.org. I also want to point you toward the New Mexico Economic Development Department's one-stop website for starting a business. That's gonm.biz. And this website is a partnership between the New Mexico agencies you need to contact when starting a business, and of course, the New Mexico Economic Development Department. So let's see if my browser will open the gonm.biz. It did. We're doing good, guys. You're good luck. And here's the Economic Development Department website. What I want to talk, there's a lot of information on this site. But the information I want to talk to you about is located under business resources and EDD programs for business. And there's a lot of programs, as you can see here. The ones I want to talk to you about is people thinking about opening a business are the financial development resources. And the first program I want to talk to you about is LEDA, or the Local Economic Development Act. And what this act does is it allows the state of New Mexico to put aside a pot of money to fund municipalities' efforts to bring in new businesses. And it's a reimbursement program. So say, and you have to fall into their categories. It's usually economic-based businesses, manufacturing, value-added agriculture type businesses. And if you want to start one of those businesses in one of the municipalities, it's usually in a rural area. The state of New Mexico could give that municipality money to reimburse you for some expenses that you incur to locate in that area. And let's see, what's qualifying entity? An industry for the manufacturing, processing, or assembling of agriculture or manufactured products. So that's the value-added agriculture and the manufacturing. A commercial enterprise for storing, warehousing, distributing, or selling products of agriculture, mining, or having been manufactured. We have opportunity zones. I'll talk to you about that. That's a great place to have a warehouse. And an economic-based employer, which they define as an employer is deemed eligible for in-plant training assistance by the Economic Development Department. And that usually falls into the first two categories, a manufacturer or a warehouser. That's not to say they won't entertain other entities. They have the non-qualified entities, which happen to be service or retail type businesses, but that's not to say they wouldn't entertain some of those in rural areas because their goal is job creation. And in very rural areas, say you wanted to open up a storefront in Tucumcari, you're going to employ 9 people. They probably entertain a proposal from you. Here's the information about the application requirements, and the person in charge of that program is Mr. Mark Roper, and you could contact him. I've helped a business apply for LEDA funding. It's pretty straightforward and easy. You got to remember that it's a reimbursement program. So you're putting up the capital or you're getting a loan, and then you may be reimbursed for all or some of your expenses. And there's reporting requirements and job retention and creation requirements. So keep that in mind. The next program, and it's a more general program. Most of you on the call would qualify for this program. It's a collateral assistance program. And if you have a gap in collateral, you need a loan to start your business. Maybe you want to buy a piece of property and build a building on it. You are going to contribute 10% to the project, but they want, I don't know, 40% collateral. You could only come up with 20% collateral. There's a gap there that prevents you from getting that loan. The state of New Mexico will take out a financial instrument to help provide that gap in the collateral for most people. And let's see who qualifies. Business purpose is one of the industries listed in the NAICS classification system, which that's every industry. Business is considered a small business under the U.S. Small Business Administration guidelines. I'm sure that's everybody on this call right now. Employs 750 employees or fewer. I'm sure that's everybody on the call right now. And the business is located in New Mexico, and that better be everybody on the call right now. You could use this, the loan proceeds for all these categories here. The one that happens most often is people want to take out money to operate the business for say 6 months. They tend to want, banks or lenders tend to want dollar for dollar collateral on that type of loan. And that we call that working capital, and that's where my business owners tend to have that gap in collateral, is for the working capital. How it works. And then here are the banks and lenders that are taking advantage of the collateral assistance program. And if you're a new business, you tend to have to work with a micro lender or community lender. And those include West. We have West here, the Lift Fund, the Loan Fund, and Dream Spring, but I don't see Dream Spring. Yep, Dream Spring's right here on the top. And then there's some traditional lenders, banks, and credit unions that participate in the program as well. So that's what I wanted to convey to you from the Economic Development Department. Visit that website for more information about their programs and more information about business planning. They actually have a great business planning checklist on their website. Step 2 is to choose a business name, and there are legal considerations when choosing a business name, and it's very important for you to find a name that resonates with your target market or markets, looks good on a website, social media, business cards, or other marketing material, and is easy to spell and pronounced. And most importantly, it isn't trademarked or copywritten by another business. And let me give you this example. It's a tasty example right before lunch. There was a restaurant in Albuquerque called Dee's Cheesecake Factory. And if you grew up in Albuquerque, this was probably one of your favorite places for lunch or a sweet treat. The owners of Dee's Cheesecake Factory started this business after World War II and trademarked the name in the state of New Mexico. So they had a trademark on the name Dee's Cheesecake Factory. Fast forward to about 2010, there's a national chain called The Cheesecake Factory that wants to do business in New Mexico, but they can't operate a restaurant with Cheesecake Factory in the name because the savvy business owners at Dee's reserved the business at the state level many years before. In this example, the small business had the upper hand, but you could imagine how a small business operating under a trademark business name could end up being sued, have to change their business name, and all that expensive marketing material, and it might actually destroy a new business. There are two types of trademarks, a state and a federal. The first website on the screen is for the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and the second is for the New Mexico Secretary of State's office. These are the two agencies responsible for registering trademarks. And since we can't provide legal advice, it's important for you to consult with an attorney before making a decision on a business name. And I'll show you some great resources for researching copyrights, patents, and trademarks. And that includes the newest member of the SBDC team, the Technology Commercialization Accelerator at New Mexico Tech, staffed by Estefanita Rawlings. And then the library at New Mexico State University, they have that holds the grant for the Patent and Trademark Resource Center, and they have a great business documents patent trademark librarian. His name's David Irvin, and they could help you research trademark copywritten business names. Okay, step 3 is choosing and registering your legal structure. The legal structure of your business is its foundation, and you must carefully consider how you wish to legally operate the business. The common business structures are on the slide, and everything but sole proprietorships and partnerships must be registered with the New Mexico Secretary of State's office, and the paperwork is available solely online. More information about legal structures can be found on a document on our website called Basics of Choosing a Business Entity. And let me bring up that follow-up email. Here it is right there in the follow-up email. And it goes over the laws under which it's created by an attorney, and it goes over the laws under which you're governed as a small business owner. And then it goes into the descriptions of each of the types of business entities and maybe the legal considerations you need to think about. Most people on the call, I'm sure right now, are thinking about a limited liability company. I get that's the most common type of entity that people come into my office wanting to start. You do that through the Secretary of State's office. It's pretty much 3 pieces of paper. You could file it all for yourself online, but the things you need to consider are what's my physical address, what's my mailing address, and this is all public record. What phone number am I going to use for the business? What email address am I going to use for the business? And who is my registered agent? And if you have more questions about those things that I talked about, just put them in the Q&A and I'll answer them at the end of the slides. And now that we're having fun talking about paperwork, let's talk about step 4, obtain your federal employer identification number. This is the unique identification number issued to your business by the IRS and is used on all federal filings. And if you're a sole proprietor, you typically use your social security number instead of an EIN, but most banks and credit unions in the state of New Mexico require that you have an EIN number to open up a business bank account. And this number is just as important as a social security number and should be protected as such. And no matter what business entity you choose, it's a good idea to obtain one. And it's free to do. You obtain it through the IRS website. They ask you a series of questions. And remember, what's my mailing address, physical address, corporate structure, things like that. Continuing with paperwork, step 5 is to register with the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department to obtain, and I have here a CRS ID number. They since changed it. It's not a CRS ID number. It's a BTIN, BTIN, which stands for Business Taxpayer Identification Number. You might be wondering what the heck is a BTIN used for and why do I need it? Well, it's the unique identifying number used by the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department to record and track your business's collection and payment of gross receipts tax. If gross receipts tax is a new term for you, you might recognize it as the tax you pay whenever you buy goods or services in New Mexico. It's usually around 8% and it shows up at the bottom of your receipt. The online registration form is free to complete, but you may want to seek the advice of a certified public accountant or a bookkeeper when completing the application, especially if you're not going to track and pay your gross receipts tax on your own. And I recommend if you're an online retailer, if you're a retailer in general, if you're a construction company, that you have a bookkeeper do that for you. Your time is probably better spent doing what you know how to do rather than tracking and paying your gross receipts tax. And whenever you sign up for a gross receipts tax ID number or BTIN, you're required to file your reports on a quarterly, monthly, semi-annual basis. So make sure you're doing those reports. The most common thing that comes into my office is I didn't file my gross receipts tax report, but I didn't make any money in the business, so I didn't think I had to. You still have to, and you'll be charged $5 for each report you miss. So keep that in mind. And since this might be a new thing, a new term for people, this might be a new topic for people. On that follow-up email that everybody should have the link to, I'm going to chat it over one more time just in case anybody popped into the webinar. Let me put it in the chat. I have a link to their workshops, the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue workshops. They're all on demand now. They might have some live ones because they actually have 2 links on their website. One's to sign up for a live one and one's to go to the on-demand, but I put the link for the on-demand. The new business workshop will cover those gross receipts taxes. The new employers workshop will cover the state withholdings taxes you withhold for having employees. And then the IRS did a business taxes workshop, a CPA actually did it. And it's a wealth of information. These are a must, especially if you're a new business owner. So let's go back to our slides. Okay. Oh, we're already through step 6. Wow, we're doing good. Step 6 is to obtain your local business license and other applicable licenses. When doing business in New Mexico, you need a business license in the municipality or county where you'll have a physical presence. For instance, Tio Filo's restaurant has a physical presence in Los Lunas, so they get a Village of Los Lunas business license. If they had a food truck and did business in Belen and Los Lunas, they would have to obtain a temporary or full business license in the city of Belen. Some of you may be thinking that you'll do business online or in another state. This means getting a business license at any place where you'll physically conduct commerce. And each municipality or county has a different requirement for obtaining a business license. So check with the municipal or county offices or consult an attorney or CPA for further advice. And let me give you an example of the special requirements. In Rio communities, they ask that you sketch a floor plan of your business, even if you're doing business from the home. In Socorro County, they don't have a formal business licensing process. They just have a letter on their website saying you don't have to have a business license to do business in Socorro County. Just get your gross receipts tax ID. And if you're going to do business in more than one place, usually if you're a retailer, you have a nexus but there's a lot of different regulations regarding gross receipts taxes, and I'm sure the different municipalities will ask that you get a business license there. Check with the municipal county offices, or again, consult an attorney or a CPA for more information. Step 7 is to report new hires to the New Mexico directory. And the link to the directory is on the slide, but it brings human resources considerations into light. Human resources is a very important part of any business and comes with many legal and accounting considerations. You can always contact an accountant or attorney for specific information, but I included links to 2 good resources for learning more about employment procedures and laws. The first one, we have partners at Comply Right. Comply Right is a for-profit business, and they sponsor the America's Small Business Development Center conference, but they have a free blog, and they have a great webinars on different topics related to human resources, like intentional or accidental hiring discrimination is illegal, what you could do to prevent it. Yep, you should really know that. Mind the gaps, labor law compliance requirements employers often overlook. Definitely like putting up those posters, or if you're going to have employees that are working solely or from home, there are special requirements for them. So take a look at some of the free resources available to you from Comply Right. And then there's another link for the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. My link works for that one. And if they investigate and govern discrimination based on the protected classes as it concerns employment. So if you discriminate in any employment practices, they will investigate and give you a right to sue letter if you feel like you've been discriminated. So before a business gets into any of those issues, please read the small business requirements so you know what the laws are. It's free. It's on their website. Take advantage of it. Let's go back to our slides. Keeping with the HR trend, step 8 is if you have employees, you may need to complete Form ES 802, and it's a required form from the New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions or Connections. And the Department of Workforce Solutions has many services, tax credits, and learning opportunities for small business owners. So I included their business outreach website on the slide. Some common services that the Department of Workforce Solutions offers are job postings, that's their biggest one, pre-employment screenings like typing tests, and in some cases they provide space to conduct interviews. And let me see if my link will work for you guys. And it does. So here, mainly they talk about unemployment insurance, which is the wage and hour division. They have a handbook just for unemployment insurance. They have information for starting a new business. They do have internship opportunities there. They have a program where they bring in low-income individuals through YDI, and they'll actually place one of those individuals to work for you to gain work experience, and they'll pay the wages for them. They have apprenticeship programs. They have a job description writer, which is very handy. The hiring incentives, they have bonds. So say you wanted to hire, you're a bookkeeping firm, you wanted to hire a bookkeeper who might have an embezzlement charge in their past. It was, a long time ago. Everybody deserves a second chance. And to make it more enticing to hire that person, they will take out a bond to protect you from theft. And that's for high risk applicants. And then they have the work opportunity tax credits, which basically it's for hiring. That's the basics of it. Talks about wage, there's wage an hour. There's the posters. Comply Right, they like to charge, they have a poster service where they charge you to provide the posters. But remember, most of the posters that you need to provide are available for free at the Department of Workforce Solutions. And then they have FAQs for small businesses. So take advantage of the free resources from them, because it's a very intricate and time-consuming process to learn all the HR type skills. Step 9 is if you have employees, seek the assistance of an accountant. You can see all the tax acronyms on the slide. And if you aren't really willing or able to deal with them, please seek out the advice of a bookkeeper or an accountant. Let's see, SUDA, FUDA, FIT, SIT, FICA. I'm already tired looking at them. The IRS website also has a wealth of information about your federal tax obligations, and I included a link to their the small business, the self-employed and small business tax center. And this is the self-employed individuals tax center, but they have the business and self-employed tax center. Talks about employer identification numbers, estimated tax payments, employment taxes. And if you go to the bottom of the last page I was on, they have a webinar. So let's see what that could be. Yeah, online learning tools, the small business taxes, the virtual workshop. It's free, and even if you're going to hire a bookkeeper or an accountant, you should still have a general understanding of what they're doing for you to make sure they're actually doing it. And if you're a new business and you're not going to have employees, you could probably get away with the first 4 lessons. If you are going to have employees, take the whole the whole webinar. It takes about an hour and a half to complete, and it's well worth your time. Let's see here. Step 10 is to seek the assistance of an attorney. And we talked about important legal landmines earlier in the presentation. And those are just basic things we have to do is operate with when operating a business. Attorneys are licensed to answer your legal questions. And for patent and trademarks, there are the 2 resources on the screen, the New Mexico Technology Commercialization Accelerator and the New Mexico State University Patent and Trademark Library. They could help you do the research. They can't give you legal advice. I have a link on the slide for the New Mexico Bar directory. Let me bring that up in the follow-up email. They're actually called the State Bar of New Mexico. Now they underwent a branding change. And under For the Public and I Need a Lawyer, there's that online bar directory. And let me show you how to use it. You pick a practice area. So business and corporations would be probably the one most of us on the call would be interested in. Patent and trademarks is under intellectual property, and that's in here somewhere. Yep, there's intellectual property. They have employment lawyers in here. And then I like to do practice counties. So let's do Valencia. So these will give you a list of attorneys that will practice in Valencia County. And let's search. And we have 50 matches for attorneys who will practice in Valencia County. And if you click on, I'm going to pick one at random because I have to give at least 3. Let's see. Miss Nicole Manning, that gives you the law firm where she's at, her contact information, and it tells you what the practice areas are. So she practices in cannabis, business and corporations, criminal law, defense, probably, government program eligibility, intellectual property, patent, trademark. So she's probably a good, well-rounded attorney there. And we know she passed the bar in New Mexico, so she could practice law here, which is important. There's another resource for you that I haven't tested. I just heard about it from a client, but it looks promising to me. And I didn't include this in the follow-up email, so I'll chat it out to everybody. But the UNM Law School has law clinics. And they have 5 clinic sections. Child and Family Justice Clinic, Community Lawyering Clinic, and then they have the Economic Justice Clinic. And it says here they have an entrepreneurship component, and that students can counsel and provide transactional legal assistance to entrepreneurs and low-income communities around issues such as formation of business entities, compliance, governance, and contractual matters. I haven't, the client that I did, I talked to, he said he had very good luck, and he said they have a lot. They give you, if you go through the clinic, they give you access to a library of information on legal issues. And he mentioned the NOLO. And what NOLO is they publish encyclopedias and articles about different legal things. And just if I haven't tried it yet, but even if I just got access to the paid services from NOLO, just by going into that clinic, it would be well worth my time. So let me chat over this information to everybody on the call. And if you have luck with that economic justice clinic at UNM, tell me. I'd love to hear some success stories about that. I didn't know they had it. Step 11 is to review the guidelines for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is one of the major legal landmines for small business owners and should be carefully considered. There are actually people who make their living suing small business owners based on ADA compliance. So please take a look at that website on the slide, and they have a primer for small business. Know what you're getting into before you get into it, especially if you're going to have employees or you're going to have people coming into a storefront. Very important. Step 12 is to establish a business bank account, and it's a best practice to keep your personal and business finances separate. And this makes your bookkeeping processes easier, especially if you experience an audit. And there's more than just a federal tax audit. There's gross receipts tax audit, state tax audit, and federal tax audit, and that's just to name a few. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FDIC, has a great learning module for small business owners called FDIC Money Smart for Small Business. And let's see if my link works. I recommend everybody attending today's webinar review at least the section called Banking Services Available for Small Businesses, because they're different. They're different than the ones available for individuals. And you could start to talk about maybe getting a line of credit or financing from a bank. I mentioned earlier that most banks or credit unions won't consider a new business for a loan. You'd have to go to an alternative lender like the Loan Fund, the Lift Fund, West, or DreamSpring. But if you make a relationship with them, they may consider that type of loan. But the FDIC offers all these modules about Money Smart for small business, and I recommend everybody take all the modules they can. And it's free. It's free. It's a free service too from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So our final step, step 13, is to have adequate business insurance coverage. And this slide shows the common types of business insurance, but I recommend you research your options with an independent insurance broker. Oftentimes, independent insurance brokers sell insurances from many different companies and tend to be less biased. You could learn more about business insurance by visiting the link on the slide, and that link is for the Hitchcock's Insurance Company's blog. Hitchcock's Insurance is one of the largest and longest lived insurers in the nation. They've been around so long, they've probably insured ships, galleons, covered wagons. And let me bring up that follow-up email, the very last link. And they have a blog or a web page just for SBDC clients. Remember, you don't have to buy anything from them, just take advantage of their free resources. And here we have the top 5 reasons for business insurance, and then they have 3 great videos. What is small business insurance? What is general liability insurance? And what is professional liability insurance? And then they have some advice on starting your business, growing your business, and protecting your business. So take advantage of them. Full disclosure, they do sponsor the America's Small Business Development Center conference. This is a lot of fun. Okay, next I'm going to go over our data tools, but I'm going to go get a sip of water. I'll just take a little bit of a break. The first 4 data tools on the screen, you're welcome to go to those websites. They have free resources available to you. The resources at the bottom of the screen, IBIS World, Reference USA, and Demographics Now, we have access to as small business advice. We pay for subscriptions to those services. If you want reports from those services, you have to make an appointment with us. I'm going to take some Q&A or some chat. Um, but I'm gonna get a quick drink of water. If you have any Q&A you want me to answer now, put it in the Q&A. If you have a chat, chat it over, and I'll come back and answer questions for just a bit. Okay, everybody, I'm back. I don't see any Q&A or chat. I guess you guys aren't chatty today. I'm tangled in my earphones here. If you want to speak your question instead of chatting it over, I will allow you to speak if you raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised, so I'll go into our data tools now. The first link is for a great 30-minute webinar from they say 30-minute, but it took me an hour, from the SBA's website on how to write a business plan. And of course, they won't let me open that from my slides. But I have a link to it on the follow-up email. And this tells you about how to write a business plan. It gives you an example of a traditional business plan and a lead startup plan. But you all remember my preference is the plan that I included in the follow-up email. If you navigate up to the top and of the website where it says Learning Platform, click there. And then they have two types of learning platforms, Learning Center and Ascent for Women. Even if you're not a woman, take advantage of this Ascent for Women online program. It's a great program. A lot of other big for-profit industries like chambers of commerce use this Ascent program. It's very expensive if you were to buy it yourself. It's online for free. Take advantage of it. And then they have the regular Learning Center, which is just as good. And then under courses, they have Plan. I've actually took the how to write a business plan courses as part of my professional development. They're great. And at the bottom, they give you those financial statement examples, income statement, how to write a business plan, checklist, cash flow, and balance sheet. And I think that's the business or the Learning Center at the SBA is probably the top resource for people wanting to start a business in the United States. The next resource I have is for bplans.com by Palo Alto Software. And if you're an old timer, you may remember back in the 90s, early 2000s, Palo Alto Software used to put a CD-ROM together of example business plans, and they would sell it, and it was pricey. Now, since they offer that live plan business planning software, they put all their business plans online for free. So if you need some inspiration when writing your business plan, they have tons of sample business plans available for you online for free. And the bplans.com, it all has a wealth of free resources and templates for you to use. The third link on the screen is for Census Business Builder, and I see we have time, so I will go over. I'll actually open that up and show it to you. And then if you want to investigate traffic counts, the Middle Rio Grande Council of Governments, which happens to be the area where I'm located in central New Mexico, they have traffic flow maps that you could interact with online. And let me show you an example of that. It's kind of hard to use and it looks a little daunting, but it's really easy when you get the hang of it. So you could enter an address. So say you wanted to start a storefront at a particular address, you could see what the traffic counts are, or you could just navigate the map. Let's go down I-25 to Los Lunas. There's setup Pueblo. Here's Los Lunas. And the Workforce Training Center is actually located where the SBDC is located. It's actually right down Huning Ranch West. So that's this, and we're at the very end of the road. So we could see what traffic counts are there. Oh, they're pretty abysmal. Okay, let's look. So if I wanted to start a storefront by the UNM Workforce Training Center, and there's commercial property available around here. In 2020, the average daily traffic count was 2,532 cars passing that way. The average weekly, that's the average daily traffic count, and the average weekday traffic count was a little bit higher at 2,000. That looks like 832. And let's compare that to another stretch of road. So the property might be a little cheaper here, but I'm a laundromat. I want a lot of people to pass my business on a daily basis and see that we're open. What if I located right here by the gas station? You could see that the average daily and average weekday traffic counts are much higher, 16,000, 18,000 versus the 2,000. So that could help you plan a business location. If you live in a part of New Mexico that doesn't have the interactive map, the Council of Governments in your area publishes the data. See, they put out these publications, but hopefully you live in a place that has an interactive map, which is easier to view the data. Now let me open Census Business Builder because it's the best free resource that I'm going to talk about today. And before I get into it, let's see if I have a Q&A. I have a question about the link to gain access to, or is there a link for the links? There is a link for the links. Let me put it in the type answer section there. Lucas asked for the link, and let me chat it over to everybody again. This is the link to access the follow-up email that I will send you all, but a lot of you are eager beavers, so you could access that email right here using that web address until I send it out to you. Oh, let's go back to Census Business Builder. It is the best free resource available to you. They have two editions, the Small Business Edition and the Regional Analyst Edition. If you're in a city like Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Las Cruces with more than one zip code, the Regional Analyst Edition would be good for you. If you're in most of New Mexico, like most of us, and Los Lunas only has one zip code, the Small Business Edition would be your best bet. And all the information is organized by a NAICS code or NAICS code. You could type in a keyword like bakery, and you could find a NAICS code that matches what your business does. If you have a very precise niche type business, you could ask your local SBDC for your NAICS code. Or if you happen to be in one of these quick search examples, you could just pick the button that best represents. And we're going to use restaurants today because there's a lot of information about restaurants. And then as you could see, you could search by state, metro area, county, city or town, or zip code. Let's do zip code. Let's do 87031 and wait until it pops up with the option and select that option. It won't let you go forward until you do, and that tends to turn people off when they can't get to this point. And you could go to a map and you could explore some census data on a map, but I prefer to create the report. I'm a more read it and learn type person than a look at the crazy map and hope it works on my computer type person. And it tells you what you'll find in this report: data about your potential customers, businesses like yours, and consumer spending, which is my favorite part of this report. So it gives you the demographic characteristics about the area that you chose. So in that 87031 zip code gives you the total population there, percent male, female, goes into some race and some age, demographics there, gives you socioeconomic characteristics, median household income, percent disabled is a cool one, average household size is 2.85, that's a cool one, percent who walk to work, that's a cool one too. And if I was going to do something in retail or rest or food service, I'd want to go into an area with an estimated household income at or above the national average. So let's see what the household income is. And I just Google it, ask the Oracle, right? And the census says median household income was 67,521 in 2020, and it decreased 2.9% from 2019, which is not good news. So, Los Lunas is a bit below that. And that's not to say you couldn't do well in a business like that here. There are tons of restaurants that do very well here, and retail outlets, but that's a rule of thumb for me. And then if you're a tradesperson, for all my tradespeople on the call, plumbers, contractors, this data for housing characteristics will be useful for you. Builders, those wanting to start an apartment complex, build affordable housing, this is important for you. And the data is a little bit behind. It's about 2 years behind, and take it with a grain of salt, but it's a great starting point when planning a new business. This tells you how many housing units there are. If I was a contractor, I would love to go into a place with old, expensive houses. So here's the average median owner occupied housing unit value. Here's the year it was built. So these are fairly, I want to say 1991 is fairly recent, but I guess it's 30 years old. But I would want to go into one of those places with high home values, old homes. That's Los Alamos right there. If you're a contractor, go to Los Alamos. And it tells you if you're wanting to put in an apartment complex or maybe start a new housing development, this shows you what it costs to own a home versus rent a home. So right now, it'd probably be a great time to develop in the village of Los Lunas. You could sell homes and people would probably want to lap them up because there are very few houses or places to rent here, and it's more expensive to rent than to own. If it was less, most of the cities like Santa Fe, it's probably cheaper to rent than to own. And that means great place for an apartment complex. And then information about businesses like yours. Most places in New Mexico are going to have no data available because there's not enough data to release it from the census. And then my favorite part of this report are the consumer spending estimates here. So this is per household per year. So it tells you the consumer expenditures per household. It looks like in Los Lunas we spend more than yearly than what we make. And it gives you different categories like alcoholic beverages. And this is the average household expenditure per year on alcoholic beverages consumed at the home. So if I would want to start a business, do my research for a business, I would want to go into a place with high expenditures probably if I wanted to do something in retail. The one that makes me laugh is dating services. The average household expenditure per year, 73 cents. Keeps going up every year. I remember when I first started doing this webinar, it was like 30 cents. So that's Census Business Builder in a nutshell. Remember, that's a free resource you could access today if you wanted to. Now let me show you some of the paid databases. I think I'm logged in still. Hopefully I am. The hardest part about this is logging in. I am still logged in. Very good. So the first one I want to show you is IBIS World. And remember, you have to create an appointment with your local SBDC to get information from IBIS World, demographics now, and reference USA or data Excel as they call it now. And I like to use the example of a single location full service restaurant because there's a lot of data on restaurants. Very common type of small business to open. And what IBIS World is they're reports put together by economists or business analysts that tell you what the future of an industry is going to be. Let me move that a second. And then I like to go over the full report. I'll go over some of the high points in this report. And let's see, this report was put together in September of 2021. Most of the reports on this website are less than a year old. And they help you put together your business plan. Your business plan will ask a lot of questions about the industry. And you can't just make assumptions. The bank doesn't run on assumptions, it runs on facts and money. And if I was going to fund a project, I want those the information to come from a reputable report like this. So let's see what key external drivers drive business in a single location full service restaurant. I also call these the key economic drivers. So consumer spending, as consumer spending goes up, this industry will do well. Consumer confidence index, which is an index that gauges how good people feel about the economy. Healthy eating index, households earning more than 100,000. So as that increases, so will this industry, and an urban population. It will give you your second and first tier suppliers in this industry, and it will tell you who your first, and if you have second tier buyers, it'll tell you who those are as well. So this industry caters to the customer, which a restaurant tends to do. Give you some similar industries. And then it'll tell you what the key external drivers are going to do. It usually goes out 5 years, but this is 2016 to 2021. And all the drivers seem to be growing, if only slightly. Healthy eating index seems to be staying the same. Revenue in that industry is projected to increase 3.9% until 2026. Profit in that industry is 7.5%. So that means almost 8 cents out of every dollar would go into this business as profit. Pretty high profit industry. Annual growth between 2016 and 2021, there was negative growth. So restaurants were closing. They don't venture, I guess, between 2021 onward, but it looks like there's a growth trend. Profit margin in this industry is 4%. Sorry, 4% is the profit margin. So that means 4 cents out of every dollar will go into the business's profit. It looks like that profit margin declined a little bit between 2016 and 2021, but it looks like it's on a growing trend. The number of businesses looks like it's going to increase 2.3% over the next, until 2026. Employment and wages in that industry are on the same growth path. Then it tells you what products and services are most popular across the United States in this industry. And let's see what type of food wins. Looks like Asian food is the most popular type of restaurant for a single location full service restaurant. And then followed by US restaurants. So it looks like we like our Asian food and our hamburgers. Gives you a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Tells you how your business does, how revenue in this industry compares to the different drivers of this industry. So as consumer spending rises, so does profit in this industry. As the consumer confidence, remember that's confidence in the economy rises, so does revenue in this industry. Does that with all the drivers. Then one of my favorite parts of this, two of my favorite parts of where it's at in the business life cycle. This industry is actually in the mature phase of the business life cycle. It looks like it's in quantity growth, but it says mature right here. And which means if you're in the quantity growth or quality growth section, that means it's probably a great time to enter this industry. If your business is in the maturity section of the business life cycle. That means you're competing against businesses that have been around 8 years or more. And if your business is in the decline, that means more businesses like yours will close than open. And when it's in the maturity section, that indicates to me there's probably a lot of competition. My favorite part of this report's coming up, and this gives you insights into who your target market is. So households earning 100,000 plus. So if I were wanting to start a single location full service restaurant, I'd probably want to go into an area with a lot of households of an income of 100,000 or more, because that's 50% of the market across the US. And then it gives you the other markets. So that's what I wanted to cover with you in an IBIS World report. Remember, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A or chat. Let me show you Reference USA or Data Excel as they call themselves now. And this is a great place to do market research. So in your business plan, they're going to ask you, who is your competition? And a lot of times I have people come into my office, there's no competition. Well, I bet you I'll find it for you in this database. If you're a business that serves other businesses, maybe you're a consultant, I could look up the businesses that you'd like to target. So restaurants, we'll use the example of restaurants. Say you're targeting restaurants in Valencia County. I could pull a list of those restaurants for you. If you're wanting, say you want to start maybe an ice cream shop, we could look at what Baskin Robbins makes in Los Lunas, and we could see what they are, and we could see what the location sales volume was. Take that with a grain of salt, but this is a good starting point for you to see, oh, I'd probably make that much if I were to start this type of business. I'm competing against this place that's already doing that. They have 7 employees. It gives you a lot of great information. You could also put this on a map. So say I wanted to see what part of this 87031 zip code has very few restaurants. Bosque Farms has quite a few, Peralta has quite a few, Los Lunas has quite a few, Los Chavez has a few, Cerro Mission, Monterey Park, Meadow Lake, Las Maravillas, Tomé, New Mexico. They don't have very many restaurants. That might be an opportunity there. We'd have to do some more research, see how many households earning $100,000 or more were there, where there were good traffic counts, probably on the major ways. But there used to be a restaurant in Tomé, did pretty well. There's a food truck in Tomé, one of my favorite places to eat when the SBDC was located at the campus in Tomé. And they probably get a lot of business. It's a busy road, and it's the only food establishment there. Let me show you the other side of it. So that's the businesses database, but the consumer lifestyles database is probably where most of you would show interest. It's by household. So I usually select one per household, and we could find out where let's say we're looking for those individuals in the 87031 Los Lunas zip code with estimated home incomes of 100,000 or more, because we're going to start a single location full service Asian restaurant. Gosh, there's quite a few in that zip code, 3,062 matches. So that tells me that's probably a good place to start a restaurant. And we do have a lot of restaurants here. Let's see. I could get names and addresses, and it tells you can't call them or email them unless you buy these contacts from Data Excel. And the last time I checked, it was $1,000 for 5,000 contacts. But you can send them a letter or a postcard, and this actually gives you the addresses for them. Also, you could put that on a map. So say you wanted to do this single location full service restaurant, and the maps tend to work better when we're not in a zip code, but we're in maybe a city with more than one zip code, like Albuquerque. And let's do the map here. So this tells you by zip code how many of those potential customers are in that area. And let's see, the largest concentration of customers for the single location full service restaurant would be 87111. That's right here. So then we could start to look. That's probably a great place for a restaurant. Then we could look up what other restaurants are in that area, where there's traffic count, where there might not be a restaurant to serve a population there. 87122 is probably another good one. Yep. Yep. Somewhere around the sweet spot would be between all these three zip codes right here. That would put a restaurant right there. Let's see. I think that's Paseo del Norte. I think there's a lot. And if you ever been to Albuquerque on Paseo del Norte, you know there are tons of restaurants there. So it just helps us, make better educated decisions. This database. I could pull a lead list for you. Oh, I got a question. How could we get access to this database? Make an appointment with a business advisor. We have special access. I use the UNMs because I just the license isn't that big. It's easy for me to access. But if you want very specific information from the Reference USA database, like you want to sort based on age, gender, make an appointment with your SBDC. We have special access to these databases. Okay, that was what I wanted to cover as far as the data tools for the business plan. They're very important. They're free to you. Take advantage of them. You pay for them with your tax dollars. Since this is a COVID-19 sponsored webinar, money we got from the COVID-19 epidemic to help small business owners, I put in a slide with the best resources available to you for businesses about COVID-19. Here it is. I won't go over each one with you. The one I wanted to really point out to you is the New Mexico Safe Certified program. If you are a retail store or a restaurant, they give you, you could get certified to serve clients. And at one point, you could have a larger capacity if you did take that training. How we measure success, now that we talked about how we could help you, this is how you could help the SBDC. As part of offering our services, we need your help to ensure our services are around for many more years to come. So we ask that you participate in our surveys, and remember, you got a survey before this webinar and you'll get one after. Please do them. You please report economic impacts because of our assistance to your business advisor or center director, and write a letter of support to your local legislators about your experience with the SBDC. This slide provides contact information for SBDC programs. These are programs under the Small Business Development Center umbrella. PTAC, or the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, is a government-funded program providing assistance to small businesses who want to sell their goods or services to the government, educational institutions, or tribal entities. The International Business Accelerator is a one-stop shop of resources for New Mexican businesses and individuals wishing to introduce their product or service into the global market. And the New Mexico Technology Commercialization Accelerator offers no-cost confidential counseling regarding intellectual property. So those are our umbrella programs. This slide continues the list of small business resources. Our partners at SCORE, the Service Corps of Retired Executives, WEST, or the Women's Business Center Program, and VBOC, or the Veterans Business Outreach Center. reach out to those agencies if you fit into those categories. SCORE does something similar to what we do. They also offer great webinars, so please make sure to visit their website. There's a few different scores. There's Santa Fe score, Albuquerque score, and Las Cruces score. I have the link here for Albuquerque score, but if you're in another part of New Mexico, maybe you want to contact Santa Fe or Las Cruces score. Here is the contact information for your small business support team. We are funded by the Small Business Administration, and many people ask about Small Business Administration loans. So I included a link to their resource guide, but the resource guide has not been online. It's been offline, and I notified the SBA about it, but they have a ton of information on their website. So visit the SBA website. The SBA doesn't directly lend, but they offer loan guarantee programs, and specifics of those lending programs for right now can be found on their website. But as soon as the guide comes back online, it's the best place to get information about the lending programs. And it has a whole list of all the lenders that do SBA guaranteed type loans. Okay, we finished with our slideshow. We finished in pretty good time. I like to leave at least 10 minutes to do Q&A. So I'm here to answer questions for you guys. Put them in the Q&A if you have them. If you want to speak, please raise your hand and I will allow you to speak. If you need to leave, feel free to leave now. But I'll stay with you until we run out of questions. Now, don't you all ask a question at one time. Okay, Sandy asks, there are so many resources available. How long do you think a business owner should research before starting? Sandy, that's a great question. It would depend on what type of business that you're starting, but I would definitely recommend doing a business plan, even if you're not going to ask for funding, and doing a set of financial projections. And that tends to, if I work with somebody on that, it tends to take between 1 and 2 months. So try to do at least 1 or 2 months of research before you jump into business. See, I got something in the chat. Thank you, Christopher. Well, thank you, Ginger. Thank you for the thank you, and thank you all for spending time with me today. Remember, if you want to speak a question, instead of typing it in the Q&A, raise your hand for me. If you have any other great business resources you want to share, put them in the chat, Q&A, or raise your hand to speak to us. Okay, let's see. Erica says, is there a seminar based on taxes only? There is. So there are 2 types of taxes you should be concerned with. There's, let me bring up that follow-up email. There's state taxes, and then there's federal taxes. So the webinars for New Mexico state taxes, look for this thing called New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Workshops. They have they have 3 webinars on demand. One is for new businesses, one is for new employers, and one is from the IRS. And then on that same follow-up email, there's the Self-Employed Individual Tax Center. And if you navigate to the bottom of this page, you will see the Small Business Taxes, the virtual workshop. And I'll chat the direct link over to everybody since you asked. And this will go over your federal tax liability. If you're not going to have employees, you could get away with the first 4 lessons. If you will have employees or may have employees at a later date, take the whole lesson. So Erica, yeah, that's a must for you. Take those for sure. I'm trying to get a webinar. We used to offer a webinar called Your Small Business and Taxes. I'm trying to get something like that back on. So visit our workshop page, every few days to see if that's up online. And I have a question from Desi. What are gross receipts taxes? Well, it's another way to say sales tax. So it's a tax imposed on the sale of products. And in New Mexico, since it's gross receipts taxes, we tax both products and services. And if you sell anything, like if you sell a service, you have to collect gross receipts tax. If you sell a product, you definitely have to collect gross receipts tax. And there are exceptions for nonprofits, for people buying products from a wholesaler to sell retail later on. And there's just a plethora of deductions, and that's answered if you go to the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue website. They have a guide. It's called the FYI 105, and it explains everything you ever wanted to know about gross receipts taxes. You'll know more about gross receipts taxes than anybody ever wanted to know if you take a look at that guide. And often when I get a question about gross receipts taxes, I refer to that guide because it changes. So gross receipts taxes can change every 6 months, and a new report of the new gross receipts tax schedule is released every 6 months. So I hope that helped answer your question, Desi. If you have further questions about it, please take those workshops and uh, put it in the Q&A. Let's see, Desi says, if I provide services on an Indian reservation, would I have to pay state taxes? Yes, and this is the first year I've ever seen it happen before. So let me bring up the schedule for gross receipts taxes on the. It would depend. So if you were providing services to the Native American, to the reservation, you may not have to collect gross receipts taxes, but you may have to get a non-taxable certificate from them. They have a gross receipts taxes map. Let's look at the schedule. Yeah, I don't like the map. I like the schedule better. No. I like the report. I like the schedule. Okay, here it is. And this is the first time I've ever seen this. But yes, the Pueblos do have a gross receipts tax rate. So if you had like a hair salon, a restaurant on the Pueblo, you would have to charge customers the gross receipts tax rate. And this is a new thing. And I'll chat this document link over to everybody on right now. Oh yeah, Patricia's already asking for that link. I certainly will send that to you. And it changes every 6 months. Remember, so they put a new schedule out every 6 months. Let me chat over the main link to the gross receipts taxes map. And if you sell products online or you're working in multiple locations, they have a new tool for you. Just go to the TAP website or the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue website for more information about that. And here we have tribal governments. And yeah, that FYI 105, since somebody asked a question, I'll just look for the FYI. Oops. I'm going to chat over the FYI 105 link to everybody. And on page, I believe it's 22. Let's see. They start going into the deductions you could claim. So if you were selling products, not really services. I don't think services are taxable if you're selling them to the reservation. I think only products are. But you could get, if you get a tax exempt certificate from them or an NTTC, you could get your deduction of gross receipts tax, which means you don't have to pay them. And Eric asks, when I apply for a CRS, which is now the BTIN, but yeah, when you apply for a gross receipts tax ID, that's the portal and the login you'll use to file your gross receipts tax reports and pay the gross receipts tax if it's due. Yeah, I'm having trouble saying BTIN now. I'm trying to get it in my vocabulary because I've called it a CRS ID for so long. But and the address for that's in that quick start guide, but it's tap. Let's see. .state. tap.state.nm.us. Taxpayers access portal. And then don't create a login. If you're a new business owner getting a new CRS, I get a lot of people calling me saying I can't complete the forms. That you got to scroll down just a little bit, and then where it says businesses, apply for a New Mexico tax ID. If you already have a business, then you could use this area. But if you're a new person applying, scroll down to businesses and then apply for a new business tax ID. So Erica, I hoped I saved you at least 15 minutes of stress when you're applying for your gross receipts tax ID. And I don't see any questions. We have, if anybody wants to ask a question, raise your hand. Put it in the Q&A. We have time for about one more question. So last call. Okie dokes. I don't see any questions in the chat Q&A or nobody's raising your hand, so you're free to go. I am poop to pop from talking all day. So if you need anything from me, remember that first slide and that follow-up email has my contact information. If you, I do encourage you to reach out to your local SBDC and make an appointment with your local SBDC advisor. Trying to get back to my first slide so you could see my contact information. And I'm just going to say bye for now. Thank you for spending time with me and I hope to see you all in the future. I'm going to end the webinar for all.